Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb Podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahy. Today we have a lot of news to cover. I listened back to some of the older podcasts and I realized I may have been talking a little fast, and which caused me to get out of breath because I became too excited. And there are a lot of things that I want to cover whenever I'm doing the podcast. I usually have a list of topics and little notes that I covered or scribbled down, typed up, and then I go through my topics list for the day. And I'm sorry if I've been excited to talk. It's the first couple shows I've ever done, and I am working up. I do have 2 podcasts going. The second podcast I do is Dad Strength, also sponsored by Socially Numb, hosted at the same site, and that's where we're going to start. So the first thing, Apple News. I've become invested in trying to get my site content on Apple News. I want to try to get my content out to as many venues as possible, and that includes Apple News, Google News. I don't know what the process is, how hard it's going to be, and I know Bing News also has news. Yahoo used to have news, but now that Yahoo's bought by Microsoft, every link on Yahoo News goes right back to Microsoft. So I'm going to try to put my site content on these sites, and I'll give a little insight as I do it and go about it, because I want you to know how I'm trying to expand, reach a new audience, and cover different material. So if the podcast aspect bothers you, you don't like my voice, whatever, my tone, my demeanor, send me some feedback. Be rude, I don't care. And if you don't like the podcast, just go ahead and read the site. Get some news out of it. I'll try to cover things, give an independent voice out there. My only problem that I foresee is that I do not put material out often enough. I believe they had talked about with Google News. I read some things where they used to require sites to have 3 to 5 posts a day at minimum. And as a one-man shop right now, I'm not able to put out that amount of content. Maybe if I start to get some guests on, some guest publications, or my other option would just have readers submit their own picks and things like that for sports, even esports, something that I've been looking into a little bit. I don't have the background on esports because, not because I missed like that segment of games, it's just because I didn't have the time to invest into it. Going into college, you don't have time to do competitive gaming. So I might have missed that whole scene by a few years. I'm still interested in gaming very much. I've watched a couple different shows, toyed around with Twitch TV, having like a gaming show. That's where I started. It was just too hard to keep going because they only catalog the free version of Twitch for maybe 2 weeks, a month or so. And so once those months were up, my videos disappeared. I think now they have capability where you can go ahead and back them up to YouTube. So I might get back into it a little bit. I wanted to start with podcasting, and obviously if I'm talking too fast, I need to work on my podcast voice first before I start gaming on Twitch and talking through different games. I do like the idea of using Twitch to kind of do mini game reviews, to talk about maybe playing through the first level, and then that way, as I play through games, I can put the videos up, have them archived on YouTube for people who are going to go. So it'd be kind of like a first impressions gaming on a budget. My only problem with that is a lot of my gaming on a budget I do is on the PS3. And I don't think the PS3 has the built-in capability to do Twitch like the PS4. So I'm going to have to table that idea for a little bit. And once I work through my PS3 games, get some of the glitches taken care of on the podcast, my podcasting voice, annoying little things that I try to do. I put a preamble, I think that's what I'd call it, on the beginning of that last podcast I did because I went on a rant about Pokemon Go. And I don't like to edit the podcasts, so I don't censor myself too much. So what you're hearing, I do live. I want to kind of give it the feel of a radio show. So my idea is to give insights on different topics. Basically, what I've settled on is kind of the intersection of technology and sports and gaming. So they all kind of intertwine together. You have technology, and as technology increases, you find it increases in sports. The one thing I saw was Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots. He got mad at his Microsoft Surface, so he threw it. I think he threw it on the sidelines. That might have been an exaggeration from the media. But he got rid of it and told them that it was a piece of junk and he would rather look at pictures on the sidelines because it was so unreliable. So that kind of thing interests me. And I also want to get into a little bit more of the stats. And the second podcast, the Dad Strength podcast I do, that I kind of broke out just for parenting. I'm kind of giving parenting tips. That was my first one. I guess what I should have did was focused on that podcast first and then started Socially Numb. That might have helped me get some of the kinks out. But I wanted to get into a schedule, so I do both. One podcast a week. The Dad Strength podcast is much shorter. I focus on one topic on that one. And I just go through different tips and things that I learned from being a parent. So this one's a little bit more structured and more of a show atmosphere. And so we're going to go on this week, and I'm going to start to bring in a little bit more of the tech side into sports and a little bit of stats. I want to do my own research and have something new and unique brought to the scene. And I know some different sites do like in-depth stats and analysis of different sports, but I want to kind of do things that interest me with no intention or ties to certain sports. I'm not trying to skew any analytics. It's things that I've thought about and I bring to it. And we're going to cover Major League Baseball today, a little bit later in the show in our sports segment as we get into the start of the World Series. So first things first, I'll go through just some news, some breaking news and things like that, some trends. I saw universities in Pennsylvania went on strike, and there were basically D2 universities. If you follow NCAA athletics, that means they are like the second tier. Division I are the big schools: Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and the like. Division II is the next step down. You have a lot of players who might have been in Division I for a little bit, maybe didn't get as much playing time, or wanted to start in Division II and try to work their way up through a transfer to a Division I school. So very good athletes. But I guess it became a strike at the beginning of the school year. I think it lasted for a few days because of the tenure structure. So faculty were pretty mad and upset that the union kind of couldn't figure out their contracts. And from there, they went on strike. Now, I do know that I think that most of the schools, if not all of them, were from the PSAC conference I saw. So I don't know how that affected their football games, but it kind of makes it a little bit unfair if your school goes on strike and then you have a football team that then for 3 or 4 days, there are no classes. So your athletes can go, they can rest. They don't have to worry about waking up and walking to class. They also, if they want to put an extra workout time on their own, they can put in extra workout time. What about the schools that didn't strike in the conference? Then they have to go and show up on Saturday after having like maybe 2 classes on Friday, then practice. They're all worn out. They travel. It's a small conference. I mean, they travel by bus. It's not big time athletics. So maybe there's not revenue lost, but it's still a little bit unfair for the kids when you have kids that are on strike that the other team kind of gets a little bit of an advantage there. So I did see that trending, and it wasn't really reported as much as I thought I would see it once they went on strike, probably because they didn't want other states to see it and have their faculty kind of go out and do the same thing. That's my opinion. The Pokemon Go update, I still haven't seen any new rare Pokemon. I know I kind of went off on this last week, but my addendum or preamble that I added to the other podcast where you can level up Pokemon if you choose them to be your buddy seems to be working pretty well. My suggestion of a leash still stands because it's an extra way to make money. You can buy extra egg holders, so why not have a leash in the game? I think there was a leash in the handheld Game Boy version. I don't know that for sure, so I probably shouldn't speak without doing proper research after last week's gaffe. But Pokemon Go, I've been walking around. At least I get to evolve some Pokemon that I don't get to see anymore that I might have hatched from eggs. I did notice that I haven't gotten any more 10-kilometer eggs. I don't know if they still exist though, because I want to say that the highest Pokemon candy walk that I saw was 5 kilometers. And I think that was maybe the dragon. I could be wrong, but that's my update on that. And going from Pokemon Go into Nintendo, the Nintendo Switch was announced. I think it was codenamed NX or DX. I think it's NX. So the Nintendo Switch is the next console in line after the Wii U. Now the Wii U was unique, and it had the motion sensor controllers, but it also had a controller that had a screen on it, I believe. I did not own one because it wasn't a big enough jump from the Wii to the Wii U. Plus, I like to play a certain set of games on Nintendo. I'll play Zelda, and Zelda might be the only reason that I would buy a Nintendo console. If there's a new Zelda game for it, that on launch, there's a good chance I'll pick up the console. I don't play the game like as I was growing up. I would, as soon as the console came out, I'd buy it, get the new Zelda game, and spend a whole month on it. Now it takes me a lot longer to beat the Zelda games because they're usually pretty in-depth. So I know that I'm going to get my money's worth. It might take me 3 or 4 months of playing the same game, and they're pretty immersive. And there are different things to do. Like you can go fishing, usually learn some archery moves. There are side quests. And with the advent of the internet taking off, you have YouTube. So you can kind of casually play. You can see like different hidden secrets and then try to recreate them. Kind of cheating. I normally don't do that, but I do see like little guides. I still use the game facts sometimes to look up the side quests to find out where to go if I'm bored and looking for something to do. Now, the Wii U did not have that. I believe, what was the last Zelda game? Twilight Sword, Skyward Sword maybe. But it came out on the Wii, and I think it also came out on the Wii U. But at that point, I already had the Wii. So I didn't feel like upgrading the system just to play a Zelda game that I could get. I think it was $10 cheaper too. If you got the Wii version, I believe it was $10 cheaper. I think it was $50 when the Wii U version was $60. So I stuck with the Wii. Took me a while to get used to the mechanics. I'm left-handed, so I did not like that they made Link right-handed, or it didn't even give me an option to switch. Because on the Wii, you had to have the nunchuck plugged in, if this is the right game. So I would have to steer with my right hand and then swipe with my left. But I noticed that when I'm doing the sword moves, they weren't as responsive because I think the way I held my hand, because being a left-hander, using a right-handed character, it just didn't work out. So I was pretty bummed out that they didn't give me a reversal option. And I mean, it's just a sprite. So maybe the extra left-handed would give some physics errors in the game system. Maybe not. I don't know. But I would have liked the option. So seeing them go back to the new console, now we have the reverse option. I don't have a Wii U. But the new Zelda game is coming out on the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. So I have an option that I can either get a Wii U for cheap and play it on that, or I can go ahead and invest in the Nintendo Switch. And as of my research yesterday, I did not see a price or anything announced on the system. I think it comes out in March, so it comes out in early 2017. I originally thought that it was going to come out in time for holiday season this year, sort of like a rush, like, hey, surprise, what are you going to get for Christmas? Now you have a present to get. Because other than that in tech, I don't see anything big that I would spend money on. I know, like, was it last year or 2 years ago, they had those hoverboards that were all the rage. So people had the hoverboards. You had to get the hoverboard. It was the new thing to do, even though they caught fire and you weren't really hovering. And then drones. Drones were my thing last year, and I didn't even get one. I did have a mini helicopter, so it kind of played off, but I thought drones would be cool, especially with like a high definition camera. But I know some cities, especially around me, you're not allowed to even fly them. So I kind of tempered on that and I never even picked one up. Now with the Nintendo Switch, it's getting pushed back to 2017. I mean, maybe if you followed religious holidays, you would have Easter coming up in the spring. So maybe, I think it's a late Easter too. So you might be able to pick up a console like that, but I don't think people usually give out big gifts like that. So I don't think it's going to have the same impact as it would have if they would have rushed it out to get it ready for Christmas season 2016. My fear, if they waited, was that 2017, if they announced it that it was going to come out in the fall of 2017, that would give PlayStation 4 or Xbox time to come out with some 4K system that pushed the realm of graphics and kind of took over and then just eliminated Nintendo completely. So now, with the new system, Nintendo has decided to go for like a little unique system that's different than the others. So if you haven't seen the advertisement, go ahead and look it up. It is a system that can be carried around. So you have the portability that you didn't have with the Wii U. I believe the Wii U had to be used with the system. I don't know if there was cables. I think there were cables. It might not have had to be plugged in. I could be wrong on that. I know the Wii had like a controller that you plugged into the controller, the actual Wii controller, but I don't know if that system, if you had to be plugged in to the actual system to see the screen or not. But this one, it looks like a tablet. So you have a tablet that's a screen. And the switch part is there are two controller halves. Your controller has two halves. The one half has the analog stick, and then the other half are the buttons. So you'd hold the buttons in your right hand normally, traditionally. Then you have the analog stick that you hide in your left hand. And the sides of them are slides. So you can slide it onto the screen and hold it. It kind of looks like a bigger PSP. So you have a PSP type style where the screen's in the middle, you have your mini tablet screen, and I don't know the specifications, but it looked to be maybe like, what are the smaller tablets? An 8-inch tablet maybe? Something around there. It's bigger than a PSP, but it's a decent sized screen. And you slide the controller handles on and you kind of play it sort of like a bigger PSP. Now, I have faith in Nintendo. Every time Nintendo builds a console or a system, it's very sturdy. But after time and time again of sliding the controllers in and out, I would have to imagine that those slides are going to become weak. So how long is it going to take of you actively switching your system into the base or out of the base before like one of those breaks? And are you going to be able to buy replacements? Or, I guess they could make those be the out, like the male connector end, and then the screen be the female, because the male part would be more apt to break, would be my intuition on it. So whenever they slide it in, they have it so that you can buy these replacement handles, sort of like another controller, because that's what they are. So they did show a place where you slide the two controller handles out, and then they had like a blank base for a middle that you could slide them into to make them into a controller. And then you had the screen just sitting there, and I think they had it fold out so that it was kind of like a mini tablet. And then someone else came over and started to play. Now, I don't know if they had two controllers input, or it looked like kind of they were each holding one half of the controller, kind of like a Wii, and then they were playing that way. Maybe like a steering game, but I would imagine that you'd be able to have two of those. If you had two complete controllers, and then you had a mini folding chair, or I guess mini folding tablet, I could see it being a pretty big system for little kids and long car rides. Because back in the day, we had a van that my dad rigged up like a television on long trips. Maybe he put it on top of a milk crate. I can't remember. But you had like a little battery generator that would run the TV for like a couple hours that you plug the TV into while you're driving on a long trip. And we would hook our Nintendo 64 up into it and play Mario Kart while we're driving. Because we're in car seats. I guess we weren't in car seats at the time. But we had a van with, I think, bucket seats. I can't remember. But we had two seats there. So me and my brother would sit in the middle, have a controller. And then my dad would just gummy wrap the Nintendo console on top of like a little mini TV. And this was back in the CRT days. So it had some depth to it to really let the console sit on top of it. And now you see cars that have screens built into the headrests or other things. So you don't have to do that. And Nintendo takes it a little bit further. I would imagine they're going to have some type of elastic band that you can put around the screen and hang it over top of a table. I mean, not a table, over top of a car seat. And it's a good idea because as a parent myself, you go ahead, you have a screen on the back of a chair, you can play your game as you drive. Now, it might not be worth it if you're going to take a 15-minute drive because most games today, it's one of my gripes about gaming. It takes forever to get to the gameplay. If you fired up an old Nintendo like the NES, put a game in, turn the system on, it might show 2 screens, boom, boom. You can usually hit start to go right through them. You can be playing a game in maybe 15 seconds. Now with consoles, it takes 15 seconds to even turn on the PlayStation before it even gets to the game screen. So on my PS4, which is greatly slower than my PS3. I don't even know which word I'm looking for there. But my PS3 still takes time to load up. But in the NES day, you turn the switch, the game was instantly on. And it might be due to the cartridge. And that's what Nintendo's going back to with the NES or Nintendo Switch. So you have a cartridge style, looked like a mini flash card, kind of that you would have got in an old DSLR camera. You put the compact flash in, and then that's going to go ahead and give you the storage for the game. So now we have these cards. We don't know any details about them, but I would hope that they're using some type of SD card. And I hope that they make these cards writable. And my theory is, I might have mentioned this last week with the Pokemon Go, but Nintendo has a great opportunity here. You have a rabid fan base for any games. You also have old games that people will still buy. I think I talked about a retro NES console that was coming out that had like baked in NES games. Now, they have that coming out, and I think it sold out almost immediately. I mean, they released that Pokemon Go tracker, which was like a Bluetooth thing, and it's going for the extra because it's already sold out. It's going for like $200 on Amazon. So they have product that people want. Why don't they open it up? So my idea for Nintendo would be to start your Nintendo store. Make it like the Apple Store, the Google Play Store, the Amazon Marketplace, whatever, where you go in and it's kind of like Steam, where it's one gaming location. You create your Nintendo ID. You remember the ID, whatever, it doesn't matter. They can link it up with like your Pokemon trainer. But what they should do is, and if they're going to re-release these games, have developers say, hey, you can opt in, but we're going to take a cut. So you put your games on this digital download system that can be played on Nintendo, and we're going to go ahead, and it's a virtual console system. So it's kind of like the retro. They did it on the NES, on the Wii. They did the Super NES on the Wii. I think they did the 64 on the Wii. I don't think they had the GameCube, but they had this virtual console on there where you could buy a game, and it was like $5 for NES games, I think $8 for Super Nintendo, and $10 for N64 games. But they should expand it. They should go ahead and release a patch, or even, I don't know if those are tied to your Nintendo ID. I want to say they switched it. I haven't signed into mine before, but like one game I got on there was, so the Wii came out, and I had a shortage of games because the Wii didn't have any developers really pick it up. I think there was like a Medal of Honor that came out, maybe, if people even remember Medal of Honor, maybe a Call of Duty. I think there was a James Bond that came out for it. But after that, I mean, there weren't a lot of games besides the Nintendo ones that people were excited about, and that was one of the knocks on it. So it became a novelty console. But I was willing to put $5 down on to get one of the greatest games of all time, Super Mario Bros. 3. I think I also got Dr. Mario, just because I wanted some multiplayer games that you could fire up. So there, I had the original NES console games. They're floating around somewhere. I donated some of my old games that I didn't play anymore to Goodwill. So I have console games that it would have been a pain to fire up because you would have had to put the Nintendo in the TV. It's only AV, and I would have had to have the controllers wired, sit down, play. The game might freeze. I'd have to do the old school, take the game out, blow on it, maybe use some alcohol wipes, try to get my connectors clear, and then start the game. Plus the Nintendo I had didn't work, so I had like a knockoff cheap NES Nintendo, like a remake. So my games worked kind of, but they weren't as good, and it wasn't as solidly built as the original NES. So it was a nice change of pace to be able to have these games on the Wii. You had a nice solid Wii type controller. It wasn't the original Nintendo controller, but it was okay to use. So what Nintendo should do is expand on that. Have these games be tied to your user ID. Go ahead, send emails out, say, hey, if you purchase games on the Wii, we're going to be building a Nintendo locker place, locker room, whatever they want to call it, so that these games are associated with your ID. They encourage, they tell developers, now like, hey, if you redid games on the Wii, we can probably adapt them. I mean, come on. Start with the NES. There were emulators for them back in the 90s, when computers weren't even common. Someone had went around, ripped their games, put them on the internet. There were like thousands of Nintendo games you could buy, even Japanese versions. Nintendo should be able to hire someone to get these games to play on any console. Go ahead and standardize it inside. Tell Nintendo employees, anyone that's coming in, like, hey, if you're going to design a new system, it has to be able to run these virtual consoles. Because then you're going to have people who are going to buy the new consoles because the games are already loaded on. You don't have to hope. Like the thing with Xbox and PlayStation 4, when they don't do backwards compatibility, it makes people mad. But they have to upgrade because at any time they can cut the old systems off. You can't find games. If you do gaming for a social aspect, you're not going to be able to keep up. People are going to talk about different games. It's one thing for a PC. PC people can always upgrade their system, constantly upgrading to play new games, but most of the time they can keep playing their old games too. So that's the downside to being a console guy right now. PC people can keep buying the same games. If you have the old game, you can run some kind of virtual box, get the system up and running that you need. If you have a Windows XP, fire one up, Windows XP box. They even have boxes for Windows 95. You have a Windows 95 system right on your computer. You don't have to do anything special, and it fires your game right up. So that's what Nintendo should do with their systems. Go ahead and put all of these emulators on each system. Right now, and if they only did Nintendo consoles, they have the NES, the Super Nintendo, N64. GameCube is going to get up there in size, but like an NES, if you have a 60 gigabyte flash card, you could probably fit every Nintendo game made for the NES and every third-party publisher game made for the NES on one flash card. And it doesn't even matter if the storage system or the game loading system is different per console, because if they're in this digital locker place, you just download them to your system. So I get on my Nintendo Switch or whatever, fire up my system. They sell like the blank flash card. People are still going to buy the blank flash card, even if you need the flash card to have headers for each system. Say you need NES headers on the system. You go ahead, put it on the flash card, so people have to buy that. That's if you want to kind of squeeze money out of people. If not, just give them a blank SD card, if that's the size that you read, or sell like cheap blank ones where people can go ahead, have them formatted for a system by a download. So like you would sign into the console, go to Virtual Console Store. It would say, what would you like to format your card to? Pick NES. And then it would say, these are the games you own. You scroll through and download the ones you want. Then you can really take the Nintendo Switch on the go. If I'm going to take a 15-minute car ride, I can sit down and fire up the Super Nintendo and play a couple rounds of Mario Kart for the Super Nintendo. I can go ahead and beat a level of Super Mario Bros. 3. They can add saving. You had save states on the PC back in the 90s. They can save the state of your game. It's not that big of a file. So you can pick up and play anywhere. And that's if they want to go in this direction. And I think that's where they should go. Because if they don't have a plan like this in place, and people don't start to switch over to the Nintendo Switch, there's no reason for people to. I mean, they have the Nintendo Switch, the controllers slide in and out. I'm sure it's some type of Bluetooth. They should get someone to go ahead and invest. And what they should do is do limited runs of retro controllers. There are stores that do retro controllers. Nintendo can go ahead. I prefer the NES controller for NES games. I know most of the time they do a retro controller. It's shaped like the Super Nintendo. Why did they do that? Because then it's more flexible. They can push more out, hope to sell more. But they could sell even more if they did limited runs. So like they announce it like, hey, if you buy a Nintendo Switch, you can get this NES style controller. Limit 2 per household, 4 per household. I think there were some 4-player games for it. It's going to be $20 a piece, whatever. It's Bluetooth compatible. We're going to make 10,000 of them. Even start lower than that. Do 1,000 per month. And see how they go. I bet they would sell out if you have this virtual console, because nothing beats playing Super Mario Bros. 3 on the original controller. Tecmo Super Bowl. I know they have rights with like the NFL, and they usually do Tecmo Bowl, but they should release Tecmo Super Bowl. 30 teams. They can do 30 fake teams. Just put the city names. And if a city doesn't want to be in there, pick a new city. Have fake names. You can do random name generators to fill out that game with the same stats. Everybody knows it's 1991. You have Bo Jackson on the Raiders. You know where the team is on the screen. Go ahead and pick it. They could also expand it by having their system opened up. Even use a general emulator. People still hack NES ROMs and make their own versions. If they did some type of like indie Nintendo store where they were like, hey, these are the emulators. If you want to make your own version of these games, here you go, blah, blah, blah. If you try to sell them, the original publisher of the game gets whatever, 50%, 70%, make it something ridiculous, because people are doing these hacks for fun. Give them a way to make some revenue by revitalizing some of these old games. That would get people to come around. People want nostalgic stuff. Go ahead, put it on a system. Let them get it. Let them download it. Let them go ahead and kind of take over the system. Let them own it. Let them make it their own. Just because you got a system that you can take on your own, I mean, I don't know. I haven't had a portable system for a while. I don't like playing games on my phone because the phone battery is not suited for games. Phones always overheat. You pay so much money for a phone. You really don't want to play games on it. If I put the time into playing Pokemon Go, I know that my phone's going to die pretty fast. Is it going to help my battery in the long run? No, it's going to hurt it because I'm constantly draining it as I walk around. Plus my phone's heating up. That can't be good for the internals of the phone while I play the game. Hence why I always turn my screen brightness all the way down so it looks like I'm not even playing. People would walk by and they would see like a blank screen. Why? Because I don't want the screen to overheat my phone. And so now they have a dedicated system. I wasn't a fan of the 3DS when it first came out. I did see they did do some cool things with it. I just wasn't a fan of 3D game. I didn't think it was the future. I didn't think 3D televisions were the future. Because I seen one when it came out. I watched a movie in it, Beauty and the Beast, and it was disorienting. I went to see, what was the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot in 3D. It was okay, but you can't sit there and watch virtual 3D all day. Your eyes can't take it. I remember getting dizzy. It's just disorienting. You could watch one movie every once in a while. It wasn't too bad. But if you try to watch like 3D games, it was just taxing on the eyes, especially for older people. I could only imagine if I had glasses and I had to try to do that. Same with virtual reality. I've tried the Oculus Rift when it came out. I even had a dev kit for it. I put that on, played a few games. You get motion sickness after a while. So it's something that you can't do over time. So it seems like every developer, every console's going in that direction. Is it going to be a bust? People have been trying it for years. Why is it going to work this time? I don't think it is. I mean, maybe if it got a little bit better, a little bit lightweight where you couldn't even feel it on your head, and they had realistic environments, but you can still see the pixelation, even on some of the best high-def screens. So there have to be some improvements, and I've tried a couple different systems now in virtual reality. And even looked at doing some of my own environments and trying to put high-definition graphics into it. If you put super high-def graphics into it, it gets glitchy. I don't think the processors are in them to run fast now. You have a computer that the fan kicks on, it just starts blowing heat. I just don't think that we're there yet for that to take off. And so Nintendo here, if they're going to keep trying to go forward, they have to kind of go back a little bit. Let people play the old games. There were some old games that I played that I would still play. I would still fire up Star Fox 64 or whatever. There was even Star Fox Adventures for the GameCube. Like, that's a game I would fire up and play with my kid. And the games were shorter. They didn't have to play super long games, and it wasn't like hand-holding back in the day. They were challenging games. I remember it was a social aspect to it. You had to go to school to figure out, like, hey, where was that one star in Super Mario 64? I can't find it in the Ghost Castle. And then someone would be like, hey, I know where that one is. Do you know where this one is? And you start talking back and forth. But now with the internet, you can just go ahead and type in YouTube, star whatever, 65 on Super Mario 64, and it would come right up. Someone shows you exactly how to get it. And yeah, allowing these old games to be able to be played isn't going to bring back a social aspect to it. But hey, if you're sitting out at a park, let's not use a park because you want people to be active. But like, let's say it's a snow day and you're out like sitting in a bus stop or a train station or something, even a restaurant like a bar. You're out watching a game. You pop up your Nintendo and fire up and start playing like some old retro game, maybe Blades of Steel. Start playing some Blades of Steel and you have a second controller and you're like, hey, anyone want to play? I mean, the old games have to be better on battery than these new games. Put them on there, put like battery saving mode to play the virtual console, and the Nintendo Switch would sell. That would push it over the edge. But as it stands right now, it's going to depend on if all the developers who pledge support actually support it. Because I've seen it in the past where so-and-so pledges support for the system, but they only put their AAA title on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox. And then Nintendo's left in the dust, but they support it, but they put like some kid's game on it. Like, hey, yeah, we do put our games on there. We put blah blah blah, whatever some kid's show is. Disney Channel game. And then you're like, oh, well, I thought you were gonna put so and so game, and they're like, oh yeah, but it's a little bit harder because it doesn't have the processing power, and you have to write in another language. Each system uses their own programming language. They haven't decided on their own. That could be a Nintendo booster. I don't know what language Nintendo uses, but if Nintendo would kind of pair up with one of the other big two and say, hey, you can go ahead and develop for Microsoft. I've been waiting for that to happen, but it seems like Nintendo seems to be leaning towards Apple in the long run. But like, you could say, hey, we decided to use the same processing language as Xbox. So all of our games for developers, you just go ahead and it will downsample. Here's a compiler. Compiles the game right for both systems. You would see every game on both systems. But I doubt that with either company not giving leeway like on cost, like, hey, if we're doing this, we have to split some type of revenue. That wouldn't happen, so I don't see that happening. What I do see is Nintendo opening it up. So they're starting to support like iPhone and things like that. I think they have a Super Mario Run come out. That's something I might play on my phone just because it's a swipe game. But there are already 100 swipe games out there. So besides just playing as Mario, there's no point to download the game. And Pokemon New was something refreshing. I know it was based off another game, but you had something new that you would want to play with friends. So Nintendo, put your Nintendo store together. Let people buy old games. There you have it right there. Make the emulator for the iPhone. If you buy an old NES game, right there, you can download it on your phone and play. There are already emulators to do that, but make it official. You can make it better. Add save states. Add different things. Add cloud save. That would be great. You're sitting there playing Legends of Zelda 1 on your phone. Hurry up, save your state. Backs it up to the cloud. You go home. Pop open your Nintendo Switch on the screen, slide the controller handles out, and you're back to playing again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'll keep you up to date with news on the Nintendo Switch. It's something I'm going to be following closely. Any other games that are coming out, I'll keep you in up to date with as well with my thoughts. Now for sports. Don't have a lot of time for sports today. I went a little bit long again on gaming, but college football. not a lot to say other than big upset. Penn State beat Ohio State. They blocked a field goal late, returned it. It was at home, a cold, rainy game, but kind of puts a wrench in the Big Ten showdown between Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan is my team, as you know. Michigan went out there and dominated again. It makes me worry out there that once they get challenged, they might not know how to handle it. I know they were challenged with Colorado, but that was only one game and it was early and at home. They go on the road at Michigan State. Michigan State has not looked good. If they keep blowing teams out, they get to that Ohio State game at the end of the year. There could be potentially a three-way tie right now with Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan if Ohio State beats Michigan and all three teams win out. So top four right now. I'm not going to go through each team. I realize that's boring for a podcast, and I'm trying to make it so that you can listen to the podcast out of order, not really up to date. I mean, you want to catch up on news for the Nintendo Switch, get my thoughts. You can kind of do that up to the console comes out. Once it comes out, I mean, there's some topics that I'm going to be able to cover that are only good within a certain vacuum. So, college football right now, you have Alabama, Michigan, Clemson, and Washington, I believe, are the top four. It would be a pretty great playoff slate if it stayed that way. I don't know if it's going to. Washington plays Utah. Utah's a pretty good team. So that will be their next test. They also have to play Washington State, who's been playing pretty well. Clemson plays Florida State. So it's a pretty big weekend for two teams. Michigan State hasn't been that good. That's who Michigan plays. It is a rivalry game. I could see it being tighter than what everyone says it's going to be. And then Alabama. I think Alabama's off. Not really sure, but they do play LSU soon. And that will be a game to watch. The only two teams that I think you could beat with Alabama are LSU and Auburn. And Auburn just because it's a rivalry game. But it's looking like Alabama's going to end up in the SEC title game undefeated and ranked number 1. They are the team to beat, and they look really good. The NFL, their down ratings 11%, I think, across the board. They blame it on the election, but the games have been boring, and the presentations are awful. I have to mute these games. The Monday night game, Denver, Houston, you know it's going to be low scoring. The game Sunday night, last night, was even lower scoring, 6-6. I think it was a tie. I went to bed in that one. Who wants to watch a bunch of missed field goals? I think one was blocked. And it's just they have to have better matchups. I know they might be playing. I've heard some rumblings that they might be playing ESPN. Putting bad matchups on ESPN is kind of a payback for a lot of their Deflategate coverage and different things like that, and how they kind of badmouth the NFL. But I mean, come on. There has to be a better product out there. Maybe if they let the guys celebrate a little bit and have a little bit of fun. I mean, it's not exciting to watch. And there's so many penalties. I could see, like, if the penalties are outrageous, like a nice helmet-to-helmet, ripping the head off. But I've seen some random calls that are close, like a false start, or hey, his head was over the line, or like a holding at the wrong time to kill a drive. And it's just frustrating to watch. And I can't really watch these games. People are getting hurt. They're just not fixing the issue. And Major League Soccer, they have playoffs starting. I've been trying to keep an eye on that, trying to see how that is evolving as a league. There are no teams in North Carolina. The closest is, I think, DC United. I met some of the players from that team once at a concert. So they're pretty cool. I usually pull for them. I think they made the playoffs, and I think they play tomorrow. Not 100% sure. So I'm going to kind of keep an eye on that and try to bring that up. Different soccer news. I might expand. If United States sports are getting boring, I might try to expand and just start watching Premier League or something to cover. Anything that I could bring tech into and different stats. And with that, we have Major League Baseball. The playoffs are starting. The Chicago Cubs have made the playoffs. Or the World Series, actually. And for the Chicago Cubs, they're finally in it. The first time in however many years. I think their manager wasn't even alive the last time they were in the World Series. And they always say that they haven't won the World Series since like 1908 or 1918, something like that. And they always complain and they always whine about, hey, we're cursed. There's a curse of a billy goat out there. Just like the Red Sox fans used to complain that they were cursed. But I thought about it. How does team revenue and like salary affect the game as a whole? Because you have some teams out there, like the New York Yankees, who are always number one in payroll. So I started to dive into the statistics a little bit, given a little bit of an analysis from a fan perspective based on the business side of sports, something you don't see too often, or at least I don't see too often. And I put together just a little spreadsheet to cover this today. So the stats I found for payroll go back to 1998. It's on the guy's website, Steve the Ump, Payrolls. I did a spot comparison, so they look right based on other information I found. I just couldn't find them all in one place, as convenient as he had them. And I couldn't find a breakdown because there are 30 teams in Major League Baseball. And since 1998, there have been 30 teams. So you should be able to see the trends of who pays for good players, because there are only a handful of great players. Look at the NFL. You have a quarterback who can carry your team. There are only a couple of them. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Brett Favre. I'm just trying to think of some off the top of my head. Maybe who was the one from the Cardinals for a while? Kurt Warner. They were quarterbacks that could get the job done, took multiple teams to Super Bowls or close. And baseball is the same thing. There's only going to be a certain number of top-level talent. And so which teams are willing to pay for it? So what I did was I took the payroll, and these are payrolls from opening day. I know trades can affect it later on down the line, but I just wanted to see, coming into a season, and it goes all the way up to 2016, so we have the current numbers. Going into a season, which teams can give their fans a legit reason to be excited? And I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, their ownership always complained, oh, well, we can't afford the players, people aren't coming to the games, blah, 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 things like that. You always heard it on like the talk radio. I don't know if it was widely covered. I don't even know if you could find things like that. But you just kind of had that sentiment like, hey, we can't really pay to keep players, or it's not worth it, was the thing. Like, oh, we're always going to trade our best talent. So it was kind of depressing. Like, you knew, oh, we have a great guy. I wonder who he's going to get traded to. Maybe he'll get traded to a contender. I know the Braves did a lot of deals with them, being a Braves fan growing up, just because they were always on TV. But looking at the payroll, I can see why Pittsburgh never competed. 29th, 26th, 27th. What's their highest? 19th? Pittsburgh's highest payroll, going through my chart here, in almost 20 years was 19th in the league. How are they going to compete or even make the playoffs? And I don't care if you're going to follow a team as a fan, you want the ownership to put your team in a position to succeed. The highest payroll that you've ever had. And you've had great players, Pittsburgh. I mean, you had Barry Bonds at one time back in the day. But since that day, when Barry Bonds couldn't make the throw from the outfield, you've only had the top 19th out of 30? That's not a commitment to winning. Your fans deserve better, and that's just an embarrassment. So, I didn't dig too deep into these. I'm going to do a better analysis and kind of put it on my site, and that's where I'm going to kind of see what kind of feed I can get going for like news sites and different things. I want to try to give a different angle to sports coverage. See it from the average fan's eyes. Maybe some people didn't know this. Maybe it's something new. Maybe some people did put some research together. I tried to find other sites, could not find this information, so I decided to do it myself. I wanted to see if Cub fans really had a gripe that they didn't win the World Series. Were they cursed? So, looking at my list, what I did was I ranked payrolls. So you can go through and view the payrolls by year. I'm going to kind of put this information together, put it on the website. I might do like a special Major League Baseball section. I would like to do other sports too and kind of do a comparison, because I know NFL and other sports have salary caps. So are certain teams that are always good, like the Steelers are always good, are they close to the salary cap every year? Or is it just something different? Is it management picking the right players? Because in baseball, there's very clear teams that are willing to spend. So this starts in 1998. It's 2016 right now. So this is the 19th season that we're in right now based on the data. And I just couldn't find any older data that I could use. And I figured this is a pretty big sample size, 18 years, 19 years after this year, which we'll have soon in a couple weeks. So next year, once I get the data in, put it on the website, next year's spring training, we'll revisit this and kind of look and make predictions based off the payroll. Who has the talent to win? So going back through, the best payroll team are the New York Yankees. So in 18 seasons that have been completed, and if you count the 19th because the Yankees are already eliminated, they have won 4 World Series. They have the number 1 payroll most years. I think the lowest they've dipped is second. So if there's a team you want to root for, if you're new to baseball, root for the Yankees. They are trying to win. Now, they're not the only team. The Red Sox are usually pretty high on this list. I want to say the Dodgers as of recently. And I'm going to go ahead and do a team-by-team analysis. What has changed? Some teams kind of ebb and flow. And so I have a list of these World Series winners. And the World Series winners then get kind of grouped by how much they paid for the World Series win. So 1998, Yankees won. They had the second highest payroll. They also won in 99 and 2000. So the results might be kind of skewed because the Yankees won the first couple World Series on my list. And they had the first payroll. And again, whenever they won it in 2009, they also had the top payroll. Now there was one glaring standout, and that is the Miami or previous Florida Marlins. Back in the early 2000s, they won with a payroll of 25th rank. And that stands out to me. But overall, it seems consistent. You have to be in the top half of team payrolls to compete. And I know playoffs have like a random edge. You might be able to sneak in with a lower seed or lower payroll if you're in a division that isn't as tough. Now you have a wild card, gives an extra team in. You have one playing game. Put your ace pitcher out there. You could win, get on a hot streak. It's not that difficult once you get into the playoffs. But I haven't broken these down by playoff contenders to kind of see what the average is. I only did World Series champions so far, just for this podcast, because the Cubs fans always cry that they haven't won a World Series. But did they deserve to, based on their ownership and their payroll? Okay, so the year-by-year Cub data. The highest payroll they've had is third, which is pretty good. That is a contender payroll. And that occurred actually twice, 2009, 2010. They have also dipped quite a bit. So in 2014, they had a 23rd ranked payroll. And I didn't go with the numbers. What I did for each year was I just looked purely at the number of teams and where they were slotted. If, like let's say for an example, you were the number 5th or 6th team in payroll, but you were the first in your division, you obviously have the edge to even get to the playoffs to have a chance to compete. So back, if you remember, in the 90s, early 2000s, the Atlanta Braves were always winning their division. Their payrolls were 4th, 3rd, 6th, 7th, 3rd. And then, when they stopped winning, 15th, 11th, 15th, 16th, 23, they quit paying for the players. So as a fan now, looking at the data, and I already expected this with the Atlanta Braves because you could see the drop-off as a fan. And now they're complaining that no one is going to the games. Well, we got lucky. We had Bobby Cox for a while. No, we had players. Back in the day, they never would have got rid of Teixeira and sent him to the Yankees. But that's exactly what they did. And they've had other young talent that they let walk. And they've said, oh, we can win with a lesser payroll. No, you can't. Not right now. And so, as a fan, when you expect that level of commitment and then it goes away, it's very depressing to know, like, hey, We have the 20-something ranked payroll. We're not going to compete this year. And I think it went ahead into this year, 23rd ranked payroll. I knew going in, we're going to have an awful year. And hey, they're still better than some teams. They might not have had the worst record. I don't think they did. But they were close. And they went ahead and extended their manager. I mean, if you're complaining about Bobby Cox not being there, then why are you extending a manager that got you so many bad wins? So, the Cubs, though, generally, they're pretty consistent. They're in the top half. So overall, the Cubs average for these 19 years, including this year, they've ranked about 10th. Now, I didn't rank the teams, so I didn't do the complete stats. I just did the average. So their average right now is 10.421. That's their 19-year average on payroll. So it's pretty good. Pretty good average. Now, what about the World Series champions? If you count every team, this includes all the number 1 Yankees and the bottom Marlins at 25. The average of the World Series payroll rank is 8.166666. So, the Cubs were just below the average World Series payroll line. Now, I'd imagine that there are some teams above that line that didn't make it. I mean, Baltimore had a string where they were pretty high, but then they kind of dropped off as their team dropped off in real life. Maybe Texas, did they win it? I don't see them on my list. I could be wrong. I have to double check some of these before I put them up on my site. But you have a breakdown of World Series champions. Cubs are close. I could see them having a gripe. I go ahead and I see the gripe. Now, if you take out the two extremes, because some people go ahead and take out the two extremes, the outliers, that's one of the number 1s for the Yankees and the 25th for the Marlins. That average of World Series champions raises a little bit to 7.5625. So 7, about this top 7 payroll. So you need to be in about the top 4th of the league, top 3rd, if you're keeping the outliers in, to get your team to the World Series. Not even to the World Series, just to get a championship. So, looking at this data and going ahead and looking at the World Series this year, it looks like the Cubs have a good chance to win. The Indians would be the extreme outlier of outliers. I know they made some trades, so once again, this doesn't mean the end all. These are opening day roster salaries. So Cleveland this year, and I'll just double check, they are ranked 24th. So 24th in payroll overall. Bottom. They would be the second lowest opening day payroll to win the World Series in my data chart. The Cubs this year are 14th. So the Cubs, looking at only roster value, opening day, are the team that would win it. Just based on that. I know Cleveland made some trades. They got a good closer from the Yankees and things like that. I don't have the payroll at the World Series time. But opening day, you knew going in that it would have to be a special year for Cleveland to get there. Just to get there. They were in the very bottom. And they did. The Cubs, you could have expected an average year. Now, you knew they had some young talent. And the young talent gets expensive after a while. That's why you saw the drop-off from the Florida Marlins whenever they won it with the low payroll. They couldn't keep their team. So they had 1 year to win it. And when they didn't, that was okay. Their team fell apart. They just got lucky twice and won the World Series. I think they won it twice. With two different teams. I think one in 97. So right before my data started. So I don't have the other data set to know how much they paid for the first championship. So this year, just going on that, the Cubs do have a legitimate chance to win. And I don't mean to jinx them, but I just wanted to see, as fans, have they been overvaluing their team? And yes, looking at the data, yeah, now they could have got to a few World Series with the 10th ranked payroll. They were up to 3rd. I could see them being mad that they didn't win those years, but you need to be consistent overall. So now they have a little bit lower. Some of their talent's going to come up for free agency. Are they going to pay to keep them if they don't win this year? That is going to be the deciding factor. If they have a team that can compete year in and year out, or if it's a one-hit wonder and they have to go ahead and start over from scratch. Now, overall, though, does Chicago itself have a gripe? No, they don't. Looking at championships by team, including the 5 major sports, including Major League Soccer, which you can remove, Chicago has 29 championships, most of them in the NFL. And going back to pre-NFL, before the Super Bowl, you had 11 championships in Chicago, which were the Bears. And you had the Bulls with Jordan with 6. And you had the White Sox. They even won in my data set in 2005. If those are the ending years. Yeah, so the White Sox. Chicago has a Major League championship. It's just not the Cubs. And I could see you growing up in a city. You could be spoiled. You have 2 teams. There are some cities on the list that don't have any championships. Charlotte have been to 2 Super Bowls within the past 15 years or so. Lost both of them. Just in North Carolina. Atlanta, I think the same thing. They won 1 in baseball in 1995, but they had the top team that won the division like so many years in a row. You don't think that a management putting a team together like that deserved more championships? More than the Cubs, who had about the 10th ranked payroll? And I know Atlanta has kind of dropped off, but back in the day, they were 4th, 5th, 3rd, 6th. So there you have it. The stats. I'm going to throw them up, try to put them in a way that's presentable for each team. I'm looking at doing like maybe some graphing or something and some more comparisons just so you can see what teams have been committed. And I don't mean just one peak year where you pay a high salary. Which teams can kind of build? Because you can build with a low salary. I mean, the Indians right now, 24th, they made the World Series. Are they going to pay? Are you going to see their team's salary climb as they keep this core group of guys? Or are they going to let them go sign with other teams? And that's the difference. And I'm going to see, it'll be interesting to see if there are trends where you start low and build your way up, like the owners try to tell their fans. Like, hey, we got to start from scratch. Look at the 76ers. They bought them out each year. Try to get a new draft pick. They've had so many, I think they've had number 1 picks for a couple years now, and none of them have panned out. So eventually you got to start paying money for proven talent. You can't just keep going and bottoming out for rookie talent. I remember people saying about Houston, oh, Houston bottomed out. They cleaned house. Give them a couple years. Well, the past couple years, they've had the 30th payroll. I don't think they made the playoffs. So when is this talent going to take fruition? That's what you heard with the Pirates. We have so much talent coming up. But whenever you trade it each year, it doesn't matter how much talent you have. You have to keep the talent, build a core group of guys, and then pay them. Pay to keep the talent around. So that's it for this week. I'm going to be kind of doing some deep dives into some stats, looking at things like that, trying to give a different view on things. I don't just want to kind of regurgitate the news like I started out doing. And I'll be working on my presentation, trying to get the vocals a little bit more clear and try to get a rhythm going, try to keep it a little bit slower paced. I know I get excited and I start to talk pretty fast, but I'm trying to make it as enjoyable as possible. I think I have some interesting information that I can get across. Again, if you have any topics you want me to cover, if you want me to do some deep dives into other team salaries or the business side of sports, let me know. I would like to do a comparison. So I'm going to do different sports. So I'm going to do a start with the Major League Baseball, try to get a section going on my site. I'm also going to try to put a little news spin, try to get some different news. I'm going to the All Things Open conference in Raleigh this week. So I'll be trying to spout out some tech news from that. So look for me on Twitter, TheSociallyNumb, and go to sociallynumb.com. I have some other social media that I'm going to start rolling out and try to get my feeds listed on more sites. But I'll keep everyone updated as we go through. I'd like to start uploading these podcasts on YouTube. I don't think YouTube has a limit. And I'll probably try to keep this one around an hour or so. So thanks for listening. I am your host, Richie Leahy, and you have been listening to Socially Numb.